Have you ever stared into the mirror for just a little bit too long? Not to, inspect your skin, not to adjust your hair. I mean, like, really stare, like, in silence, and feel like something is staring back at you. You can never explain it, but it's really unsettling. It's not scary per se, it's just kind of revealing about yourself. Like that reflection knows something about you that you've spent years trying to forget. That is because it does. You see, the mirror remembers far more than you ever will, more than you ever wanted to. You think that you've buried your past, you think that it's gone, it's never coming back. And you think that time means distance. You're assuming that the healing is forgetting, but your body doesn't forget. Your nervous system doesn't forget, and your reflection, that's simply just the physical residue of everything that you've lived through. Every single betrayal, every single humiliation, every night that you swallowed your voice and just slept, the way your shoulders tense up around those people, the way that your eyes dull, the subtle avoidances in your posture. Those things do not lie. They simply linger, but only the mirror remembers it. And that is one of the truths that a lot of people do not talk about when they say move on. Move on to what? You might forget the name of that person who broke you, but you'll still flinch every time they, come around you. You'll still flinch every time someone uses the same perfume or same tone. You might not remember the argument that you had with them word for word, but your body will still react the same way when conflict arises, because memory isn't just a mental thing, it's also a physical action. It's psychological and it's also cellular. And there is a version of you which is still trapped in time, still frozen in those moments that you never processed. You're walking around, you're smiling, you're socializing with others, but a part of you never left the room where it all went quiet. Part of you is still gripping the edges of that bathroom sink, trying not to cry. Still listening for those footsteps that might never ever come back. You're still carrying guilt that was never meant to be yours to carry. And you've trained yourself to function like that. You've built your life around those things. You've adapted, maybe even succeeded in adapting, but that still doesn't mean that you've ever faced it. You can run from your past as much as you want, and you can pretend to have grown, and you can convince the world that you're okay and you're fine. But the mirror, the real mirror, not, the filter that you use, doesn't care about your performance. It always reflects your reality. The parts that you've curated and the parts that you've tried to kill. Carl Jung called it the shadow. He called it the parts that we disown from ourselves. The anger, the shame, the fear and the vulnerability. The shadow itself isn't inherently evil. It's just unexamined. And the things that are unexamined are the same things that control us. Not consciously, but subtly. Like the way that you self-sabotage yourself right before things get good. Such as the way you chase chaos because peace feels unfamiliar. Like how love makes you feel anxious because somewhere deep inside, love was never safe to you. You look in the mirror and you ask yourself, why am I like this? But instead, the better question would be to ask is, what things haven't I faced? Because the answer that you find isn't in the affirmation. It isn't in the distractions. It isn't even in the therapy speak that you've memorized to sound like you've done the work. It's not in the things where you say, yeah, I'm fine, I've got over it. It's in the stillness and it's in the silence. It's in those raw, unfiltered moments where you stare yourself into the face and you admit, I'm not over it. That is where the real change, that's where the performative change actually starts. Not when you start to act upon healing. It's when you confess what you've been avoiding. Most people will never get there. There's a vast majority of people who will never come to find this truth. I'm fortunate for them. They could have watched this video. But most people will run away from those problems. They will, they'll avoid everything they can, which is understandable. Who would ever want to revisit a pain which nearly killed them or nearly ruined their life? Who would want to peel back the scabs that they've spent years trying to heal? And who wants to remember a thing that never ever got closure? The twist is that what you don't face stays dormant. It festers and it leaks into your life. It leaks into your relationships and it leaks into your confidence and into the future that you're trying to build. You don't have to relive that moment, but you have to confront it. You have to confront it with honesty and with grace and with that understanding that your shadow is not your enemy. Instead, it's your evidence. It's evidence that you've survived. It's evidence that you've felt and that you've endured. And once you finally meet that reflection without flinching, without some fake smile or without saying, I'm fine, without some sort of distractions, you begin to integrate that part. You begin to reclaim that part of your life. Because the mirror doesn't want you to hate what you see. It just wants you to see what's on the other side. It wants you to see things without the persona, see things without the mask, see things, which aren't curated. It just wants you to see you. It wants you to see the one who's been holding it together the whole time. The one who never got that apology, the one that's still waiting for some validation. The person who doesn't know how to rest because rest may feel like weakness. And maybe, this video does sound heavy. This is a tough topic. It might be sensitive for some to go over. Maybe it does sound quite dramatic. But for me to tell you something right now, the act of finally facing yourself is the most courageous thing a person can ever do. Because it is a million times easier to lie. It's a million times easier to just say, I'm good, how are you? It's easier to stay busy and to scroll and to overwork and to call it ambition, when in reality it's just avoidance. It's rewiring that depression and that sadness into something that you think is work, but instead you're just trying to get around the distraction. There isn't any peace in pretending. If you want true, real growth, you have to look closer. You have to microanalyze. You have to analyze not your appearance, but instead your patterns. You have to ask yourself these things. What am I trying to prove? Who am I performing for? Why does success feel so hollow to me? Why does my love feel so unsafe? Why do compliments make me cringe? Why can I not take a compliment? And why do I laugh when I instead want to cry? Those questions I just listed off are examples of amazing questions that you can ask yourself, and they'll give you a fucking insight onto who you really are. Because those answers, like I said, they do not live on the surface. They live in your history. They live inside the mirror. And the mirror, the history, isn't something that you can escape simply. It's something that you have to learn to carry with you. Something that you have to learn to carry properly. Because there's no shame in being shaped by pain. But there is so much danger in letting that pain shape you in the dark. Unacknowledged, unchallenged. That is how the cycles form, and that's how they repeat. That is how generational trauma becomes such a common occurrence. The mirror will never stop showing you every single day, day after day, until you decide to look at the mirror with new, raw eyes, not to criticize, but to understand. It will stay there every single day. You're not broken. You're simply layered. You're complex. You're worthy. You just have to understand each individual layer. You're not behind either. You're just becoming. You're turning into that person that you want to be. But becoming isn't a passive action. It's not aesthetic. It's that raw, unfiltered work, that ugly, that disgusting work that you don't want anyone to see. It's not that hustle culture bullshit. It's inner work. It's the things that you do when no one else is watching. So the next time you genuinely see yourself, the next time you really actually see yourself in the mirror, don't turn away. Instead, you have to stay, and you have to ask yourself, what part of you hasn't been heard? What part of you has been silenced because someone once said to you that you were too much, that you talk too much? What part of you was abandoned because that love came with conditions? Sit with it. You don't need to fix it all tonight. You don't need to fix it all right after watching this video. But you do need to stop pretending that it doesn't matter, because the mindset that you get into is one of the most important factors. And it does matter, because you matter. You as a person matter. No amount of pretending will make the mirror lie to you. So meet the mirror. Meet it as you are. And little by little, that reflection will start to become recognition. Not of the pain, but instead of the self beneath it. The one who has been waiting for you to reclaim them. Thank you.